We're recording and we're live on Facebook. It's 10:30 a.m. on Thursday, and we're recording our weekly coaching calls. This topic is part of a multi-part series on the Ideal Montessori website, and today we're going to be talking about automated tour scheduling. And of course, with us is veteran Montessorian and the founder of Needle Marketing, Matt Hillis. Matt, thanks for being here.
I'm super excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the website that is needed by all Montessori schools to get more tours, increase admissions, and really build your community.
Absolutely. And Matt, you found the automated tour scheduling recently, right? This is kind of a recent development.
Yeah, we've been using it for, gosh, I'd say probably about a year. And it has been, the benefits have been really immeasurable, not only from our perspective. It's made my admissions director so much so much happier in terms of her day to day work schedule and her life in general. She loves it, and I do get a lot of feedback from parents about how much they like being able to book and confirm tours online immediately with us.
And if you're a member of Needle Marketing, you've probably heard us talk about this. I dare say it nauseum. We've been pretty bullish on this narrative, but there's a really important and powerful reason, and that's because it works. And we're going to talk about that today. Quite a bit, actually. Matt has some case study information he's going to share. So, without further ado, Matt, would you mind introducing the tool that you use specifically?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I mean, ever since we had a website, we have had people uh, had the ability to contact us online to schedule a tour. And like many other Montessori schools that I have seen, it was a basic web form. So they would submit, uh, the interested parent would submit their name, their email address, their phone number, the age of their child, the program that they're interested in. And what would happen is our admissions director would receive an email, and then she would play phone tag for, oh gosh, sometimes up to a week, trying to get that other parent on the phone, send emails back and forth, trying to get a time that coordinated with our calendar, with their calendar. And it was just taking so long to do the logistics of actually confirming a time to come meet. And so I started looking into different options, and there are a myriad of options available for online schedulers, and I tried most of them. One of the things I like most about Calendly is the ease of use on our end and the ease of use for the parent. It just works and it makes sense.
And Calendly, there's actually a version of it that's 100% free and free forever. Do you think that a new Montessori school that didn't have all of the same robust needs that you have, do you think that somebody could get away using the free version?
I think you could absolutely start with it, and it will serve that need for scheduling basic tours. When we start to get into again more robust features, you definitely want to upgrade. I will say that it's $10 a month
Mhm.
for the upgrade, which is a very reasonable cost in terms of what you're getting for that. So start with a free version, play around with it, and if you like it, I would really suggest investing in the $10 a month to move forward with the paid version.
And Matt, Lakeisha just commented and said she's having a tough time hearing you on Facebook Live. Curious from some of our other members on Easy Webinar if you're able to hear us okay. Go ahead and chat in, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Testing, testing, testing.
Lakeisha, is that any better? And Kim came in saying I can hear you fine. So I think Easy Webinar is okay. I wonder if Facebook is having some issues.
Well, the good news is that we will have a replay of this available. If for whatever reason somebody can't hear us, you will be able to watch the video afterwards as well.
Yeah, and Lakeisha, Matt just said that you made a great point, which is we're recording these as well. So the recording is going to be posted to Nito um, after the end of the video. I'm sorry you're having a hard time hearing us. I'm going to post a link to the Easy Webinar channel in Facebook. Um, and there we go. If you're already using Calendly, um, the one of the things I'd love to encourage you to stick around is we're going to present you with some of Matt's best practices and some of the questions that we've been getting from members about how to use Calendly. I think will be answered here. So I don't want you to feel like if you already have Calendly installed that this is not going to be applicable to you, because I feel like we're still going to provide quite a bit in the way of value. In case you're not familiar with it, you go to calendly.com. You can see their website here. Per Matt's note, there's a free version which offers the basic functionality, and then the premium is $10 a month. And just full disclosure, we're not Calendly resellers or affiliates at all. It's just a tool that Matt found, and we've been really happy with. So this is the utility that we're talking about, and the web address is calendly.com. Um, let's talk about some of the specifics, Matt, if you don't mind.
Sure. Specifics in terms of what
For the
in particular?
parents specifically,
Sure.
what do they see? How does it work? Would you mind if we ran a demo on Bergamo's site?
Absolutely. That would be great.
Awesome. So I've got here's Matt's site, and he's got a great implementation of Calendly, which is this floating call to action here in the bottom right hand corner. And what's cool about it is no matter where I go on the site, it's going to be a consistent call to action. So I can travel into the site, read different content, and I'm just constantly reminded in a very subtle but ongoing way that I have the opportunity to schedule a tour, which I think is really important. It's important to be really clear with our calls to action, because you want to direct people as to what the next step in the process is. And so when I click on schedule a tour, I now have the opportunity to choose one of the 4 locations that Bergamo has. And Matt's done a really good job here of providing additional context for each one of the locations. Matt, do you want to speak to this at all?
Sure. So, we have 4 different locations in kind of 3 regional areas, and 2 of those locations have elementary. So, one of the reasons why we invested in the pro version is we wanted to have multiple events available. So, we have, again, multiple locations. If you use the free version, you'll just be able to have one type of event. Now, that could be fine if you are one school at one location and you offer tours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's the same type of tour. We were a little bit more complex with that because one of the schools has infant, one of the schools does not. 2 of the schools have elementary, 2 of the schools does not. So we really needed to make sure we had that flexibility, which is why we invested in the paid version. I also, due to the volume of our tours, I also had to bring on other people to be able to assist our admissions director and do tours for themselves. So I needed to add other people who would have a calendar that would then coordinate with their availability for tours. So it got a little bit more complex. I'm probably the most complex user of Calendly in the world for somebody that's working at a Montessori school. So I've made every mistake in setting that up. And quite honestly, it's such an easy tool to use that it didn't really take that long to kind of figure out what worked best. But I would say for 80 to 90% of the people on the call, the free version with one event would probably work just fine, and it would work really well for you.
Thanks for that, Matt. And as you can see, we start to establish expectations right out of the gate. So here there's a message from Bergamo saying things like adults only, which I think is an issue that you run into relatively often, right, Matt? This sort of helps let people know what to expect.
It is, yeah. Setting expectations from the beginning is very, very helpful. Um, And note that we also put in parentheses exceptions can be made if necessary. Sometimes we have people who are moving to Sacramento and their child is with them and they're here for 3 days and they don't know anybody else in Sacramento. Of course, I don't want to say that that they can't come tour the school. I just want to set an expectation that really for us, when you're touring and observing the classroom, it's going to work best if your child is not present, so we can actually have an adult conversation and focus on um, really getting all your questions answered without being distracted. But we will absolutely make exceptions as needed. And again, this information is repeated as we get into the email confirmation series. This information is repeated um, to them as well, so it's said multiple times.
And so when a parent chooses the school that they want to tour, the next thing they're met with is the day that's available to them, which automatically saves time. I mean, if you think about the process you go through via email just to land here in the conversation, and then by the time somebody responds with the day that works, you might have already booked up that day. Calendly gets all of that out of the way, gives you the opportunity to choose the day. When you've chosen the day, you can choose the time. You can see that Matt's actually really very booked up, but there's multiple times available. And as the times are chosen, They're removed from your calendar, so they blocked out for your team, and then they're also no longer available publicly. Which, if you're offering private tours, helps escape redundancy, overbooking, etc. Um, and Matt, my experience with Calendly is you can offer public tours as well, right? That caps out the number of people that can book a single event.
You can. You can have multiple. You can have tours available where multiple people could book one event. So if you were doing group tours, and I know that some schools do group tours, um, you could have that option as well, where one person could book the 9 a.m., but that 9 a.m. is still available for another person to book, and then that person would just be added to that tour and would receive the same confirmation as the other person does.
Mhm.
We tend to focus on individual tours. That's a personal preference that I think you need to work out what's best for your school and for your local community. But for us, we're still doing personal tours in the mornings.
And when the parent chooses their time, they provide their information, including their phone number, which is pertinent to some of the best practices we're going to talk about. Um, and they also provide the program information. And what's great about this is now we can segment them inside of our tools. So we know who they are, what their contact information is, and the program they're interested in. So we can speak to them with a great deal of specificity. Is this something you want me to pause on, Matt, and pass over to you?
Yeah, there's a really interesting point here, and I think this is about kind of the psychology of scheduling a tour online. Um, I see this a lot, and this isn't just for Montessori schools. I see this a lot for private schools, independent schools on their inquiry forms. Some of these implement with, whether they're using Blackbot or they're using other types of database or school administration programs. They ask way too many questions on the inquiry form. I mean, it's like they want basically your mother's maiden name in addition to your child's social security number. It gets crazy, and I think you really need to distill down for yourself and for your school what are the essential things that you need to know about this family before they come tour, because anything that is extraneous is going to prevent them from scheduling.
Hmm.
So, if I'm looking at a tour form and it's going to take me 5 minutes to fill out, and they want to know all this background information and all this other stuff, I think that's a real barrier to entry. So, what I really focused on was making sure that we had their first name, their last name, their contact information. Right, that's essential. And then I just want to know what program that they would like to tour so I can have an expectation. Then there's an expectation. Then there's a box for any questions or comments, so we know in advance if there's anything that we need to address. But beyond that, we're going to get all the information that we need from them, their background information about their child during the tour. We have a paper form that they fill out when they come to tour, which helps us get that information. So it really serves, in my opinion, doesn't serve a purpose to have a 1 or 2 or 3 page questionnaire when you're scheduling a tour. I think that all that does is prevent somebody from taking the action that you want them to take. And in our case, I know that the more tours we schedule, the more applications we receive, and the longer our waiting list will be. So that's my goal.
And Camille's asking, do you distinguish between tours and observations?
We do. So this is just for tours. So as part of our admissions process, we want parents to come back and observe after they tour. So this is really just a first exposure. And so for us, our tour involves really sitting down and meeting with them for the first 15, 20 minutes, learning more about what they're looking for, what their interest in Montessori is. We give them a walking tour of the campus, and then we also have a chance to take a quick look at the classrooms. This is not considered an observation. So, an observation is something completely different where you're coming back after kind of getting the global sense of what the tour is. You can actually come back and sit in the classroom in which your child would be ready for, and spend 45 minutes, an hour, and that's a much different thing than a school tour. Again, for a school tour, like, we're going to be looking at all the classrooms. We want them to see, even if they have a 2-year-old, we want them to see what our upper elementary classroom looks like, because our expectation is that they would be graduating from elementary eventually, right? We want to enroll people who are looking for the longer term, and so we want them to see those classrooms, and we can usually get that done in between 60 to 75 minutes for this initial school tour.
Matt, do you use Calendly to schedule your observations as well, or is that done by hand?
No, so that's still done by hand. That's something I haven't set up yet, and it's something that we probably should. But that is kind of on the queue to be moving forward in the future.
And in order to do that, you would need one calendar for every classroom, correct? That's the way that would
Yeah,
work.
that's really the issue, and it would be an expense thing at that point because um, we'd have to have a calendar for every classroom. I'd need to make sure that that calendar was correct, that it was, you know, when a teacher was being out, is that calendar updated? It gets a little bit more complex, and so I'm not sure if it's worth the time and attention to do that because right now they're just kind of scheduling that through the admissions director. And quite honestly, at that point, we already have this relationship with them, right? We've met them in person. We know who they are, and it's much easier to schedule an observation than it is to schedule an initial tour and kind of get all their first questions answered.
And Camille just chimed in saying we decided to set up both online, which I think is great
Oh,
context. I love that you did that. Thank you for sharing that information.
interesting.
We have.
Yeah, and you know, quite honestly, and I don't know the size of Camille's school. I think that you know, if I had a school that was at one location and just offered primary, it would be great. Calendly would be a slam dunk for something like that for us because we're looking at you know infant, toddler, primary, lower elementary, upper elementary. It does get more complex to figure out.
Mhm. Just a note for everybody. We actually have courses inside of the Nito library on setting up Calendly. If you're a First Plane member, this is one of the free courses available to you. So this is available to everyone. So if you haven't set up Calendly yet, we walk through step by step how to create an account, create an event, install it on your site. There are two additional courses for Second Plane members and above that show how to use Calendly for Gmail. Um, and some of the more advanced implementations. But if you don't have Calendly yet, we'll help you get it installed, and that's inside of the members area. I'm going to go back to our presentation and continue to kind of speak to Calendly from a parent's perspective. Of course, is much easier to use. And what's interesting about Calendly is it has a lower barrier to entry. It's a little friendlier than people having to call in or email in because it sort of lives into the DIY nature that is today's digital experience. Matt, do you want to speak to that at all? Some of your experiences to what you've seen from parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to this need for immediacy, and from their experience, being able to book, get a confirmation, get all the follow up information that they need immediately, even if that's at 2 a.m. You know, it's funny. I look at some of the metrics sometimes, and I'll see when people are booking tours or visiting our site, you know, between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., we usually get a little spike of traffic and people booking tours. And I think that's because this is the one time of the day when, you know, everything else is turned off. They're not at work, their child's asleep by this point, and this is the time that they've set aside to solve this problem that they have, to really start to make a decision about what they're going to do and what school they're going to choose. And so for the parent to be able to get this all resolved, that there's no more actions to be taken. They don't need a phone call tomorrow to actually set up a time. They don't need an email chain back and forth to confirm, um, you know, what time they're coming in or where they're going to be going. They get all that immediately, and that immediacy I think is such a huge benefit that people don't look at in terms of the user experience. So I've had a lot of compliments from parents about that so far. That it's just easy to use, and I don't have to. It's not cumbersome, right? It's just a much quicker experience for them to use.
And I'm going to chime in here, Matt, and hopefully you don't mind the analogy. But I remember in a marketing conference, I was listening to a thought leader that I really respect, and he talked about the fact that there's actually people get a shot of dopamine when they're able to check something off of a list. Um,
Oh yeah.
there's a very real psychological satisfaction that we get when we're able to do something, and so giving people the ability to check something off their list, it pushes them one step closer to their goal. And it's very hard to do at 10 p.m. or 1 a.m. to schedule a tour unless there's a tool like this available. So it kind of sets you ahead. Um, Sandeep's asking, how do you manage your time after you've committed it to Calendly? Is this integrated to your calendar?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually one of the best things about Calendly is that it coordinates directly with your Google Calendar. So um, if you're going to be out for a day, like let's say your admissions director is going to be on vacation for 3 days, and during those 3 days are times that you normally have tours scheduled, you don't have to do anything in Calendly. Calendly will only set appointments available to be scheduled if there is an opening on your calendar. So if you had a meeting that you had to attend that day and you weren't going to be available for a 10 a.m. tour, there are no worries. Nobody will book that time. There is no double booking. As long as you have that scheduled out on your calendar, it immediately coordinates. And as soon as somebody books a tour, guess what shows up on your calendar? All that information. You can work directly out of Google Calendar, and for us that was such a game changer because it just saved time copying things back and forth. Excuse me. That it just worked and it coordinated effortlessly.
And Calendly integrates with Google Calendar, Microsoft 365, and I believe Apple's iCal. So if you or your school's using any one of those three, then you should be able to integrate with Calendly. However, it only integrates with one of those, so you kind of have to choose a solution and move forward. Sandeep gave us an excellent segue into the next section, which is Calendly for the administrator. Matt, do you want to talk about how this has impacted you and your staff's day-to-day life?
Sure. Well, I like to know because again, I'm always I'm either in a car driving to different places, or I'm sitting looking at my email. Um, I'm not on site every day. I like being in the loop about um, how our efforts are going in terms of admissions. And every time Calendly books a tour, I get an email, I get a notification, as does my admissions director. So it's a great, you want to talk about a shot of dopamine. I mean, I love opening up my calendar, excuse me, my email in the morning and seeing, great, we booked 4 tours yesterday. um, that is that again that immediate feedback is really really helpful. So it's made my life easier in terms of just being able to kind of track and manage. I don't have to open up another program. I don't have to really think about that. I'm notified and I can kind of take note about, we've had a big uptick in tours over the last week or not. So that's been a lot easier. And then again, just being able to work out a calendar, right? If I can open up my admissions director's calendar, we use Google. I can look and see what her schedule is like for the next week, 2, 3 weeks, and see when she's going to be touring and where she's going to be located.
Calendly allows you to define custom event windows as well. So even if something's blocked out in Google Calendar or available in Google Calendar, you can set a more defined window inside of Calendly too. So you have two safeguards, I'll call it. One within Calendly where you say, hey, here's our general overarching window and appointments, and then it will reconcile against Google and read right to both of them.
Correct. Correct. So we have not had an instance where we have double booked tours. Really, we haven't had um, any problems at all, which before was not the case. I mean, I used to have, we would schedule tours, and again, we're multiple locations, but would they show up at the wrong place, or they would show up at the wrong time, or we would have some person come, a half an hour into another tour. And again, from our perspective, it just took this whole kind of anxiety about that off. We used to have to call and confirm tours. Our admissions director and her assistant would do that. As at the end of the day, they would call and leave voicemails, really confirming tours, and hey, make sure that you're here at this time tomorrow, not this time, and this is where you want to go.
Mhm.
We've really had zero issues at all with tour management from the user's side and from our side since we've used the tool.
And Calendly has some really advanced customization options. You can customize how long events last, how far out in advance people can book them, whether or not there's a minimum amount of time required for booking, which we'll talk about in best practices. You can customize the questions that are asked, the notifications people receive. It's very robust. We go over this deeper in the training, but I just wanted to make the point that there's quite a bit you can do to customize this for your needs, for your school specifically. Matt, let's talk about Bergamo. You've got some really impressive numbers here.
Yeah, yeah. So this is year over year numbers from when we were using a basic web form, which was we started using Calendly. I looked at my notes in June of 2017. So for the 1 year period before then to the 1 year period now, we have increased the number of tours by 30%, which is great considering our workload went down to book those tours. I don't know how to measure that in terms of hours, but it went down considerably. So we increased the number of tours. At the same time, we worked much, much, much less to do that. And again, that's just the power of the internet, and having something that just works and coordinates everything together, as opposed to having to have a human being do all that.
And why do you think the no-show rate would decrease by 10%? What's the difference between scheduling online and scheduling with a person?
Well, so one of the things that happens with Calendly is they get the immediate confirmation, which comes in their email. And say what you will about email, but it is the most intimate of connection that happens online. It's done automatically. We never forget to do that. We never get too busy to do that, so they always get that email confirmation. There's also a calendar link in that email, so they can add it to their own calendar, um, which is um, which is again, people are very overscheduled, and as we know, it's very easy for them to forget a specific time. And so for most people, once they've added it to their calendar and then they receive that confirmation, that helps a lot. And then 24 hours in advance, they're getting a email reminder, um, about the tour. So it's happening automatically. I will think that I would say that another reason why the tour no-show rate is decreased, is that Calendly gives people the opportunity to cancel, and we do have cancellations, right? And it's noted here there are more cancellations in advance. But I would much rather have somebody cancel a tour and me not be waiting for them to show up, and then you wind up waiting 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Um, I'm happy to have people cancel. So we definitely have more cancellations than we used to have, but I think that factors into the no-show rate being decreased.
And I wanted to return to something you just said, Matt, which is Calendly does an excellent job of integrating with other calendars. When I receive a Calendly notification, meaning I'm the person that schedules, my Google Calendar populates that automatically. And I think that's a huge value add. If you think about your parents, when they jump on and schedule with Calendly, the minute that lands in their email, depending on their own settings, they don't really even necessarily need to take action to be reminded about it, which I think is really, really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Again, it just makes the life for both the user, and the administrator so much easier. And your next point here is about less confusion. So in our confirmation email that we're sending, we're sending them all the information that they need in order to be successful on the tour. And it sounds very obvious, but like, where to go, like what is the address, right? Where are we meeting? Because they may they may think that you're at a different place than you are. That's happened to me before. So much less confusion, is a huge benefit, because and it's all pre-written, right? I don't have to do anything. We just basically took the time to schedule the tool once, and you make a couple tweaks along the way where you maybe forgot something, or oh, I should add that. But once that's done, everybody gets the same information every single time.
Matt, what does this refer to? The multiple people touring at multiple schools, the round robin.
Sure. So that's one of the features of Calendly that we use, because I do have multiple people doing school tours. I have one admissions director, but because of the volume of tours, I mean, we can do upwards of 25 tours a week. Um, it would be impossible for Sylvia to do 25 tours. So I do have other people doing school tours. Sylvia is still responsible for admissions in a global sense, and all the follow up and details around that. Um, but the round robin feature, if you have more than one person touring, is really, really helpful. You can set it up in multiple ways. Um, I set it up because I have an extra person at each school touring when Sylvia is not available, that for specific tour times, this person is assigned to this tour time, and then Sylvia is assigned to this tour time. You can also set it up in the round robin way, where it will um, it will it will go back and forth between who it assigns based upon. So if both people are available at this time for a tour, it'll do person A, and then the next time it'll be person B, and so it evenly distributes those tours if both of those people are available on their calendars for that day.
Oh, that's great. Let's talk about the best practices, Matt. And these are best practices that you've defined after a year of working with Calendly.
Correct. Yeah. So they just released text reminders, which I think is going to decrease our no-show rate even more. This is not something like the dentist's office where you get the text and you reply like yes or no to confirm. It doesn't do that. This is simply just a reminder. So 24 hours in advance, they receive an email, and then they also receive a text reminder saying that this is the time that we agreed to meet. We're meeting tomorrow. And oh, by the way, if you need to cancel, click here. And again, they can cancel or reschedule. That's what's cool too. I get as many reschedules as I do cancellations. And when you reschedule, it takes you right back to Calendly, so you can change one date to the other, and then it just shows up on your calendar. So if somebody isn't available tomorrow because something came up, instead of losing them and never really seeing them again, you're asking them to reschedule, and they can go and see the next time that's available that works for them and is available on your schedule. So again, makes it a heck of a lot easier with all that follow-up stuff that we used to have to do.
Hmm. You're sending a reminder email before the day they book. And does that reminder email include any additional context?
Yeah, the reminder email includes another link. It's basically it repeats a lot of the stuff we put in the first confirmation email. So it has a link for the address. It has a reminder that this is for adults only, unless you've confirmed with us in advance that you're bringing your child. So that goes out 23 hours in advance. And then the booking window, which is something that's important to consider, is 24 hours in advance. And the reason we did that is because I didn't want somebody to, on a Tuesday night at 11 p.m., book a tour for Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. because Sylvia is going to start her day and she's already mentally planned her day. And that would come as a big surprise if all of a sudden I need to drop everything and go do a tour when I was planning on being in the office and following up with email. So that's what I would recommend that you do. And so basically, if somebody's going to be touring on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, the very latest that we're going to have a notification and it's going to be on our calendar would be Monday at 9 a.m. So she has enough time to kind of plan the rest of her day and be prepared tomorrow to have a good tour.
Matt, have you ever run into a situation where you've run out of tour booking slots at any of your locations?
I have, and that's actually a concern of mine. Um, One of the things that's different than doing this in a conventional way, I think most of us, when we were booking tours before, the first thing we would have is a phone conversation with people, um, and we would kind of vet them a little bit, right? We would really see, oh, is this going to be a good fit? Is is this somebody we actually want to take the time to schedule a tour with, right? Because sometimes you can tell on a phone call quickly whether or not this is going to be a good option for you. And maybe somebody's looking for a 2-day a week program, right? And we don't offer part-time programs at our school, so let's get that out of the way in advance. Um, so, so, Cosm, what was your original question? I'm sorry, I got
Have
lost
you
just a
have
little bit
you
there.
overbooked at any of the locations? I was just curious.
Got it. So one of the things that that I've noticed and I have been concerned about is that sometimes people may have to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks in order to get a tour, especially at busy times of the year. Um, I may change that by offering group tours. I may do, and I haven't decided this yet, but I may do an option for to have two families on a tour instead of one, and so that would double the availability. I don't think we're there yet, but that's something that I am considering for a change in the future.
Well, the evil capitalist in me, there's sort of a background whisper that says that's actually kind of a good thing. That scarcity just lets people know that you're sought after, and there's a lot of people looking at your school.
Absolutely. And it's a good problem to have. I'm not complaining about any of that. But we will definitely have more people on these tours that come that may not be the best fit, but I think it's worth it to be able to spend time one-on-one with them to determine that. And that's kind of the cost of, the more tours you have, the more people you're going to have on a tour that may not be a good fit. But I'd rather talk to people, as many people as possible, and do as many tours as possible, just because of the volume of tours means more volumes of application.
And you already mentioned that the best practice is to block out time on your calendar when you're unavailable. This doesn't refer to Calendly's calendar, right? This is the Google Calendar.
Correct. So this is something that's really important, and we learned this the hard way. Is that when you are unavailable? So if you're going to be on vacation for those days, you can't just put uh, busy out on the all day section of Google Calendar. You actually need to go through and put in a block of time on your calendar to make sure that there's an event scheduled that says out on that day, if that makes any sense. I think it does.
Yeah, I think so too.
So that Google will recognize that there is a conflict, that there's an appointment, and your appointment in this case is that you're out, but it will not allow you at that point to book a tour because it sees that you have another appointment. So that's really essential to know.
And I'm going to rope over our example calendar just to illustrate exactly what it is Matt's saying. Um, Calendly wouldn't overbook with any of these events, but it will book this entire block. So if I wanted to block out to be redundant, then I would need to add an event to this entire block instead of just doing what some folks do, which is the all day event. Is that correct, Matt?
Correct. Yeah. If you do the all day event, Calendly will still see you as available versus you really have to put a block of time in there when you're going to be out or unavailable.
And so all I would need to do is just write in here busy, and now
Correct.
this is blocked out from Calendly.
Absolutely. You got it.
Awesome. Matt, you have a pretty robust confirmation email with, I think, a lot of really good stuff. Can you explain to us what this is and how you use it?
Yeah, so this is actually a really important thing to think about. So in the confirmation email, we're actually including a Calendly link for another type of event, which is scheduling a 15-minute phone call with the admissions director. And this is a way we're going to help to screen people out. It's a way that we're going to be able to get a lot of questions answered before they come tour. And a lot of people use this. And so rather than having Sylvia have, random times of the day when she was calling and trying to get a hold of people, we said, well, why don't we just have them schedule a time for a phone call? So we schedule a 15-minute phone call at the same intervals every day. I believe she does, 1:30, 2:30, and 4:30, and sometime in the morning as well. That every day she is available for these phone calls. And so normally, and it's only 15 minutes, so it's usually never a problem for somebody to get a phone call scheduled the next day. In that Calendly link, there is going to be, we're asking for their phone number, and we're basically say we're going to call you at this time to discuss your tour. So that is actually a link in the confirmation email that they just click on, and they schedule that 15-minute phone call with the admissions director. That is also something you really need to think about when you're doing your confirmation email. What are the actions that you want them to take? I include links to all of our social media as well in the confirmation email. Like, hey, this is something else you could do. You can follow us on Facebook. You can check out our Instagram feed for the school. Those things have been, again, it really just drives traffic, and people are very receptive to who you are and what you do at this point. And so we're going to give them all the opportunities that we want them to take to continue to engage with the school.
Matt, just so I'm clear, is it a prerequisite that they schedule the 15-minute call, or is that just there if they want it?
Nope, it's an option. It is not a prerequisite.
Okay.
The problem with making it a prerequisite is that there's no way to make sure that occurs,
Hmm.
and so that would mean more work for us. Like, it's another thing to track, right? Have they scheduled this 15-minute phone call? Going back and forth. Calendly doesn't have the availability to make sure that they do that. But I would say 75% of the people schedule this 15-minute phone call with the admissions director.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's significant.
yeah, so it is pretty popular.
And what are those
And
calls
again,
about? What do they end up wanting to know?
sometimes they want to just talk to somebody. They want to hear a human voice. They may have specific questions about Montessori, about our school. Sometimes it's obvious things that are already available on our website, but for whatever reason they overlooked. Right? They don't know what our tuition is. They don't know what our admissions what the requirements for admissions are. How old does my child have to be? These things seem obvious to us, but lots of times it's much better to be able to answer their questions directly in a phone call, one on one.
And you mentioned including a link to the tuition in the confirmation email as well.
Yep, absolutely. And again, we would think that, gosh, they would already have the tuition. It's available all over our website, but that doesn't mean that they've taken that action and have done that. And maybe they were doing this on their phone and were, maybe their partner was driving them somewhere and they had 2 minutes and they were able to book this. Well, I want to make sure that this is a pretty common question, that they have this information. It's a barrier to entry as well, right? If this is something that they're not able to afford with their family budget, we should establish that up front. So we include a link to download that tuition schedule in the confirmation email, just so that we have all bases covered.
You know what I'd love to do, and this will be when we build a more advanced feature, but I'd love to track how often the cancellation is tethered to the tuition download. Um, if we had tracked links, I think that'd be a really fun data point to monitor.
That would be really interesting. One of the things that's interesting to note about the cancellation feature too is it asks them why,
Mm.
right? Why did you cancel? And it's not required that they fill that out, but half the people do, and that's good data as well, because sometimes they'll say, you know, I found another solution, or I had a family emergency, or whatever. But it's more like, I wasn't willing. I'm more interested in, I wasn't willing to wait 3 weeks or 4 weeks to tour, which has happened. And that is data that I could then use to say, well, maybe we should start doing group tours, because I don't want people to wait a month.
And if the cancellation is not a hard stop, do you have a system for that? Do you follow up with those cancellations?
No, not at this point. They'd still technically be on our email list, so they'll be getting, our email newsletter and information about our school. But there is no direct question for them after this point. That's a one-on-one email.
And my understanding, Matt, is in the past you used to have your admissions director follow up with everybody that's scheduled via phone, and you don't do that anymore. Can you talk about it briefly?
Um, what do you mean scheduled via phone?
Well,
Like
no,
one on one?
I thought that Sylvia would, after somebody books via Calendly, she follows up with a phone call.
No, we did that when we had the web forms instead of Calendly. We had to
Okay.
do that because it was something where we're trying to schedule out a tour with them and kind of coordinate calendars. So we don't do that anymore. But like I said, about 75% of the people scheduled that 15-minute phone call anyway.
And that's it for best practices. The
We
implement.
did miss one. There was one other point on there, Cosm,
Oh,
on the
sorry, Matt.
previous slide. Yeah, so we include a Google Maps link for directions, and this is essential as well, because they just click on it, they can enter in their address, and then it gives them, step-by-step directions. I have found, and I have talked to people before, they're literally doing this on their phone when they're driving to the school, if they don't know where you are, right? They just open up their email, they click on the Google Map link, and then Google will talk them through about how to get them to your school. So that's been helpful as well, and be sure you do include your Google Maps link in the confirmation email.
The implementation, Matt, do you have a preference as far as what you think the best Calendly implementation is?
So I use both um, embedded and floating. So we have a specific schedule a tour page. I mean, if you wanted to open up our website, Cosm, I could
Yeah,
show you
I
rather than
have it
tell
here in
you.
front of me.
Yeah. So if you scroll down, well, just scroll down on the main page. So one of the first things you're going to see is right below the fold. You're going to see that schedule a tour button.
Mhm.
So if you click that, that will take you to our schedule a tour page. But always on all the other pages as well, you have that floating button. So on just about every page on our site, on the bottom right hand corner, it's going to stay schedule a tour. So I use both features, and there's no reason why people shouldn't do that. Um,
There's also a an embedded tool that allows you to embed Calendly on the page, so it's in line. You're not clicking off to another site. Um,
Correct.
this is a site we built for another Montessori member. Um, and what's kind of cool about this is you don't necessarily lose the traffic per se. So those are the multiple implementations. There's also a Gmail plugin that lets you send um, calendar invites directly from your email. So if you do happen to be emailing back and forth with a parent, you can use that plugin in order to drop some options directly into your email. Matt, do you guys use that at all?
No, and it's something that we have again on our queue to do. So rather than having a page that people would book a specific time, we can send them a link in an email for a specific a couple options for specific times, a specific event. This could be really useful, like when we're doing our preliminary meetings with parents and guides. Um, to be able to, rather than have them book something out on a separate page, a lot of that work's going to be done, back and forth in email. And what I like about Calendly is that you can use that Gmail tool to send them options to book directly through Gmail rather than having them go to a separate page.
Mhm.
But I have not used that yet. It's something that's in development.
Do we have any questions from our members for Matt on scheduling, automating your tour schedule at all? We've got another, I'd say, 15 minutes or so before our time is up. And while we're waiting for people to chime in with those questions, I will introduce the topic for next week. We're staying on the Ideal Montessori School website. And again, this is a multi part series, and it's a series that's going to go on for some time, to be frank. I think we have 9 lessons scheduled because there's a lot here. Um, and the next facet is lead magnets. Matt, can you introduce that topic and tell us what a lead magnet is?
Yeah, a lead magnet is a piece of information that you are exchanging with a prospective, with a visitor to your website in exchange for their email address. So this could be anything from, again, a lead magnet that we use on our website is our tuition rates. We will send that information to you if you give me your email. And we get a lot of those. I mean, we can get upwards of 100 a week, 100 requests for these a week. The beauty of this is that once we've collected their email address, we can then send them a lot of context and send them to add them to our email list and continue to contact them for free in perpetuity. So all a lead magnet is a piece of information that could be a PDF of tuition rates, that could be a PDF of your admissions process, that could be a password protected video, that could be a password protected blog post, that could be a quiz that you're doing. You're giving them a piece of information in exchange for their email and the ability to message them and market to them in the future.
And Matt, you have a really well performing quiz on your site that you use for exit intent, which I would consider to be a lead magnet.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that works really well as well. It's called "Is Montessori Right for Your Child?" And as somebody scrolls up to the big X in the corner to close out the web page, a little pop-up comes up and says, "Hey, take this quiz. Is Montessori right for your child?" And that's performed very, very well for us. One thing I'll say, when we're talking about the Ideal Montessori website is this is going to be the primary way that parents first engage with your school. Their first engagement will not be them on campus. It will not be them calling you. It will be your website. And so the reason why we're starting with building the Ideal Montessori website is because it is so important, and you obviously need to have an excellent program. These are all. I'm assuming that that all these things are done. That you have an excellent program. That your campus is beautiful. That your environments are ordered. All that stuff. This is something where I see a lot of opportunities for Montessori schools to grow, especially because this will be their first interaction with you. And if it is not professional, and if you're not doing a lot of the things that we are um, suggesting, I really think that you are really not picking that low hanging fruit, and you're not maximizing the capacity and capability of building your school.
One note for our members, just to chime in, we have a Montessori website that we've built specifically for NITO members. And this is available to all of our members in the third and the fourth plane. It's a templated site that we created specifically for Montessori schools. It's entirely customizable, so you can customize the colors, the content, the logo, and you don't have to use it by any means. It's an option. All of the content was actually created by a trained Montessorian too, so you can keep some of the content, modify all of it, add all your own content. But if you are struggling with the issue of having a website, just know that this is an asset that we created for you, and I think it's a pretty significant value add for being a member.
It is, and you know what? For 3/4 of Montessori schools, this website is going to be perfect. For larger schools, for schools that have a lot of customization that's needed, that's when you're going to want to spend that money to invest in building a website. I've got different opinions about that. You don't need to spend ten or $20,000 to do that. But for a lot of schools, The fact that this is customizable, again, all those colors, all those pictures can be changed. All we're looking at really is the format, and it's easy to change those things, by the way, too. All we're looking at is the format and structure, and then from that structure, you can then customize everything that you want to do. You can change every single piece of language, you can change every single color, every single image, but you're going to always have a site that is up to date, that is mobile responsive. It's really a great deal for most schools, quite honestly, in order to have a make a great first impression when people visit you online.
Awesome. Oh, and this is exit intent. You'll notice that I started to go to close the window, and we triggered some exit intent. You do not have to use exit intent if you don't want to. Some people don't like it, but we recommend it for list building. We don't
I
have
would
any.
say
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
it works. No, I was going to say is it works, right? So it's a question of what your goal and what you want your website to do. If you want to have more inquiries and build an email list and be able to grow admissions, that's something that we really highly recommend. And there's different ways to do that, different language you can use, all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be tremendously salesy, for lack of a better word. You can customize that as well to the needs of your community.
Matt, I'm not seeing anybody chime in with questions, so I think we're safe to close out.
Great. Just a reminder that we do have a lot of resources on specifically setting up Calendly. This was more about kind of the best practices and what's worked for us here in Sacramento. But when you're looking for that technical stuff, we do have that basic course available for all members, first plane members. And then if you're looking for even more, the Calendly, I think part 2 and part 3 are available along with all these other courses that are available for plane 2 members and above.
We have embedding Calendly on your website. There's a course specifically for the floating button. And then we have Calendly for Gmail and the main Calendly course as well. And the main Calendly course is available for our first plane members as one of the free courses. Matt, thanks so much for being here. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate the time that you're dedicating to our community. Oh,
Of
we've
course,
got
everybody's
questions.
busy, but this is one of the best times of the week for me because I get to sit back and really help people. We all want to grow our schools, and obviously, we all believe in Montessori, and we want to provide this for as many children as possible. And this is one of the ways in which you can do that.
Thank you, sir. Grateful to you. And Brent's asking, at what plane is the customizable platform available? And that's the third plane, Brent. At third and fourth plane, it's not required that you use it. It's a value add, but all of our third plane members have access to the site. And Sandeep saying, thanks for the office hours. Great to go over this again. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate all of our members that showed up. Matt, thanks again for your time. We will see you next Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific to talk about or to continue our Ideal Montessori website series.
I will be here. Talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.